Well, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops are inviting the faithful to pray, act, and reflect during Religious Freedom Week. This year's theme, titled Life and Dignity for All, promotes a culture of life. It advocates for not only the Catholic faith, but also the freedom to worship for all religions. Each day is dedicated to a specific cause. Today, the faithful are invited to pray for the respect of sacred spaces. And we are inching closer to the end of this Supreme Court term, and that means decision days are upon us. And there are several high-stakes religious liberty cases awaiting rulings. Joining us now is Andrea Picciotti-Bayer, EWTN News Legal Analyst. Andrea, always so great to be with you. As we know, the Supreme Court handed down 4 decisions today. Talk to us about those decisions and the takeaways.
Well, Tracy, it's very interesting. At the end of the Supreme Court's term, court watchers are on, the edge of their seat. And today was no different. The 4 cases are all very interesting, but it's what's to come that really is interesting me. And that's those big religious freedom cases that we expect maybe will come down tomorrow or next week. One involves the Sabbatarian Christian mailman who is asking for his federal statutory rights to be accommodated and not have to work on Sundays, even though the U.S. Postal Service now has a deal with Amazon to deliver packages on Sundays. And the other is a case that I've been watching for several years now, Tracy, and that involves the free speech rights of a Colorado website designer who wants to be able to design wedding websites for only weddings between a man and a woman, and whether or not a Colorado law is going to force her against her speech rights under the First Amendment to design websites for same-sex marriages. Those are probably going to come down maybe tomorrow or sometime next week, and those are very significant for religious freedom interests.
Andrea, any sense of how they may rule on those cases?
Tracy, it's always hard to read the tea leaves, but having listened to the very long arguments in both of those cases, I think that the court is going to continue to be very pro-religious freedom, very pro-free speech. And again, this is consistent with Title VII in the case of the mailman. The statutory language requires covered employees to accommodate religious practices of their employees, and our great tradition of free speech that guards against the government, whether it be the federal government or state or local government, forcing Americans to speak against their will or forcing them to say things that they don't agree with.
Andrea, I'm going to switch gears here. Yesterday, the Biden administration declined to appeal a federal court ruling that stops the government from forcing religious doctors and hospitals to perform gender transition procedures against their conscience. What more can you tell us about this and the impact that this may have on conscience protections and also Catholic hospitals?
Tracy, it's an amazing case. This is, again, another victory by Becket Law, those great religious freedom lawyers that have represented groups like the Little Sisters of the Poor or Catholic Social Services in Philadelphia. They had a huge victory in the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals, and the Biden administration, I think, sensing defeat, refused to seek review by the Supreme Court. They let the deadline pass. Earlier in this year, they also let a similar case out of the 5th Circuit, that deadline pass. And so this is a really important wake-up call to all Americans that it's important to stand up for religious freedom, whether it's in the healthcare setting, which seems to be the area in which most often conscience rights are being trampled upon. But it's also a reminder to the Biden administration that these sacred rights, both for doctors, for Catholic hospitals, are ones that are going to be protected in the courts, and try as they might, the judiciary is there to safeguard our hospitals, especially Catholic hospitals, which serve such an important role in America's healthcare.
Yeah, and we also mentioned earlier, Andrea, if you can touch on this for us, that today begins Religious Freedom Week. Talk to us more about the occasion and also the special daily request from the USCCB.
I think it's very fitting. As you mentioned earlier in our talk, this week starts off at the feast of St. Thomas More and John Fisher. It's a really big, important reminder that the Catholic Church has stood up for religious freedom and that we have incredible saints to point to, both these 2 saints as well as martyrs. Each day is an important reflection, both for religious freedom here at home and also abroad. And I'm very touched that the church and our bishops have pointed out and asked us to pray specifically on days for our brothers and sisters in the faith in Nicaragua and in Nigeria. The assault against Christians in particular and Catholics in Nicaragua has been just atrocious. And we know the power of prayer. We know that it's important to pray, to reflect, and to act. And whatever resources you have to be able to contribute to the defense of the faith and religious freedom here at home, but at abroad, please think about considering supporting these organizations, whether they're legal organizations or advocacy, care. One of the days during this week is also for service that we give to immigrants and refugees, that we can do that as a church and as individual believers at this time of great human suffering.
Andrea, thank you so much for being with us today and all of your insights. We really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Tracy. Have a good one.